Sat Nam. Good morning. Happy Monday. We are making our ascent towards a huge event on Saturday around 9:30 in Vista. Different for some of you that are in Canada. You'll have to look it up. I think even Canada. I'm not sure about Tennessee. So what you're looking up is the solar eclipse. So we're going to have a new moon in Libra at 21 degrees. And with the nodes, that is going to be creating the moon stepping in front of the sun. And sometimes this will be an annual eclipse. Sometimes the moon will, depending on where it is in its orbit. So the moon has sort of an oblong orbit. Most of the planets have this oblong, which means sometimes it appears closer and then sometimes it appears further away. In this case, the moon is at a point where it seems further away. So when it gets in front of the sun, it's going to look smaller, just a bit smaller than the sun, which will make the sun be this ring of fire. And that's what we're going towards. So I would like everybody on the 40-day to think about the ancientness of your soul, the ancientness of life, the ancientness of earth, and that we have, as humans, in our DNA, have a memory of using these sort of events to awaken, to heal, to cleanse something very profound in us. And that's what we're doing this week. I would like us to take a moment to prepare. So when we think of the sun represents the soul. The earth represents the ego in this case, and the moon is the heart. It's sort of the bridge that brings it all together, makes sense of what's happening. So the earth holds the opposing energy of the sun. So whenever the sun is in Libra, then that means the earth is in Aries. This event is at 21 degrees. So it's all about believing in ourselves in a mastery way. So mastery would be believing the truth of the soul. And in order for us to believe the truth of the soul, we have to hear it, sunya. We have to sunya that. Yogi Bhajan said, sunya is the invitation for the soul to remember that it's for the ego to have the remembrance of the soul that we are infinite. Sunya helps our humanity imbibe, co-create, absorb the reality that we are infinite. And that's when it comes to this 100% infinite and 100% divine. That these two things are equally powerful and happening simultaneously in our lives. And as humans, we tend to lean into the humanity, that which is finite, that which is egoic. So when we do that, we become ignorant. When we lean too far that way, we become ignorant and we forget that humility is the greatest strength. Ignorance is our ultimate blind spot. In this insular thought, we exist somehow as the lead role in a movie the ego is directing. Ignorance is the profound lack of vision. It is the inability to actually see ourselves and the impact of our actions. So when we're really in our ignorance, when we're really in our self-absorbed suffering, we think we're the star of a show rather than we are the show, we are all the actors, we are the director, we are the landscape, and we are us, right? So this is where profound humility makes us small enough to stop focusing on ourselves, stop thinking we are the lead role, because everything that we have in our life, our pets, our lovers, our jobs, all of it is essential to tell us who we are and what's important and what is really going on. when we focus too much on ourselves, we suffer. When we focus too much on ourselves, we suffer. We over-identify with our broken heart, with our childhood. It's not that those things are real, but they're not the most important, And when we're in this 3-day, those of you that have joined, I'm going to really push the envelope. I'm only going to give your suffering a third of compassion because there's more to you. There's so much more to you. And those parts are what we really want to ignite. And in this 40-day, when we are chanting Sunya, and we are doing this 9th Purdy, we are opening ourselves up to deeply hearing, analyzing, feeling, and becoming aware of something that we've probably never been aware of. That is the ultimate act. And then we do Subang Kriya, this physicality, the mantra, the breath, all of it is using our ability physically to become noble. But back to our little ignorance, right? I want to kind of relate this to the Gospel of Mary. I know that this is, not a part of the Japji, but all of these great ones, Jesus, Yeshua, Mary Magdalene, Krishna, Guru Nanak, these avatar type souls have a common understanding of right-sizing the ego. And in Mary's Gospel, it's really cool because the soul has a very heated exchange with the ego. Because the ego's like, you're a human killer. Why are you always chasing me? And the soul just kind of calmly just like sits back and lets the ego freak out. And the ego doesn't like the soul. Think about our egos. What is one of the grossest things we do? Comparing and then ultimately jealousy. So the ego compares itself to the soul, and there's no freaking comparison, right? And the ego sort of gets pissed, and it's jealous. Why? Because the ego knows it's like a garment. One day, the soul's going to take it off, and the soul's going to go on forever. And the ego is like in this anger and competition with the soul, and the soul just loves it. Loves our egos, loves our life, loves our humanity. The goal of the soul and the macro and the micro is to stop this fight with the ego. It's to be so enticing, to be so all-encompassing that the ego surrenders itself with free will. Like it finally like, oh my God, God is right here inside of me. I surrender. But that's some doing, right? But in this gospel, desire is kind of listing all the cravings that the ego has. And so this egoic desire says to the soul in the Gospel of Mary, it says this, it says, I did not see you go down. Yet now I see you go up. So why do you lie since you belong to me? So the ego's saying this to the soul. And the soul does belong to the ego. See this huge God power? It gets small enough to bow to the ego because it knows it's the only way. Now I want you to really take that in. In your suffering, once you have empowered and healed enough, it's all going to come down to, are you willing to take all your power to make you small? Small enough to understand the person that's hurting you. Small enough to bow down to the ego in you that wants you to suffer under the hands of your childhood forever. Because you're right. And the soul maneuvers this in such a beautiful way. The soul responds. It says, I saw you. You didn't see me, nor did you know me. It's saying this to the ego. You mistook the garment I wore for my true self, and you did not recognize me. So the soul is saying to the ego, you have recognized me as yourself. I'm not you. I'm not your human body, and I'm not your ego. I am something different. The ego thinks it is the true self, but the ego is actually only the garments or the layers of identity that the ego acquires. What's true is the soul beneath all egoic desires. What's true is what remains constant even as our egoic desires shift from one need to the next. Now listen to this. The way to dismantle ignorance is to see through the constantly shifting desires of the ego. To see the egoic desires are like clouds in the sky, and the soul is the sky. You can see why the ego gets pissed, right? Think about somebody you've been jealous of. Maybe it was something you did when you were younger, right? That feeling, right? And they just felt so much bigger, so much more power. They just could get every freaking thing they wanted, and it pissed you off, right? But here's the thing. The soul is the sky. The reason it has everything it wants is because it doesn't want anything. It is everything, and it knows it. And the soul's purpose is to polish the ego to such a degree that it begins to desire the sky. It begins to dissolve the clouds of desire. For me, you know how it feels. I think I teeter tiny bits every now and then into this kind of an understanding. And the best way I can describe it is I'm merciful. My soul has loved my ego and healed it to such a degree that my ego becomes merciful to itself in its humanity. And in that, my ego gets small. I let it become tiny. And then I get to be in the heart of this massive love, my soul. All of the holy books say this. The only way to know God is to know yourself. But it's talking about this soul, this Atma inside of us. It's the key to everything. When we know our soul, heaven is a place on earth. When we are small enough to feel the soul, Camelot is here. We can still face the tragedies of the world, but we have this feeling of what is true. We know that love is beyond the tragedies, and still we must clean up the clutter after destruction. We must open to as much compassion and healing to the broken hearts, and our own included. And at the same time, we are constantly aware that heaven is bigger, that Camelot is huge, that Nirvana is here. And it's here because the soul is that. It always has been, and it always will be. And when we chant Sunya, we begin to hear it. We develop this ability to have this hearing, this listening that is supernatural, right? It is able to hear the vibration, the frequency of heaven. Sunya Isar Barama Inda, Sunya Mukha Salahara Manda, Sunya Juga Jagadatara Beta, Sunya Shasata Simrita Veta, Nanika Bhagata Sadavigas, Sunya Duka Papakanas. Each of these Sunya purtis will go through all the things. Like this one's really about humility. That even your darkest, meanest part of you is speaking about God. Underneath the destruction of that person in your life that is torturing you is God. And Sunya helps you hear it. And, because the bottom line is all our pain departs when we listen to our hearts, when we listen to our soul. I love you so much. Satnam. Go out there and listen to your heart. It's going to be in every song and in the mouth of every person you encounter, in the vibration of the earth, in the movement of the clouds. Your soul, your heart is speaking. Now, Sunya, listen.